The researcher enlisted real mother and infants and quantified their reaction which fell into four categories. One baby wanted to maximize the amount of time smiling at their mother. Two, they wanted to maximize the time the mother smiled at them. Three, they wanted to experience three they wanted to three they wanted to experience simultaneous smiling, and four, no smiling at all. The research the researcher enlisted real mother and infant and quantified their the researcher enlisted real mother and infant and quantified their reactions, which fell into four categories. One, baby wanted to maximize the amount of time smiling at their mothers. Two, they wanted to maximize the time the mothers smiled at them. Three, they wanted to experience simultaneous smiling, and four, no smiling at all. The, ini- the initial thus come from when the Dawson Bursay collide. When the Dawson Bursay collide, and the reverberation result from the vibration that linger when the tissue pull apart. But though the younger say the Bursay, but though the younger say the Bursay have to be somewhat sticky for the clapping together and snapping apart to produce a noise. The initial thrust comes from when the Dawson Bursay collide, and the reverberation results from the vibrations that linger when the tissues pull apart. But though the younger say the Bursay have to be somewhat thicker for the clapping together and snapping apart to produce a noise with the correct loudness and pitch, that thickness comes courtesy of the markers. In comparing material with non-material culture, the first being the objects and technologies we create, and the second are custom beliefs and attitudes. The speaker gives greater emphasis to the material cultures. He gives the example of the development of genetic science and the benefits it had brought to mankind despite a fair amount of oppositions. In comparing In comparing material with non-material cultures, the first being the objects and technologies we create, and the second. In comparing material with non-material cultures, the first being the objects and technologies we create, and the second are custom beliefs and attitudes, the speaker gives greater emphasis to the material cultures. He gives the example of the development of genetic science and the benefits it had brought to mankind despite a fair amount of oppositions. There are perhaps three ways of looking at furniture. Some people see it purely functional and useful and don't bother themselves with aesthetics. Others see it as essential to civilized living and concern themselves with design and how the furniture will look in a room. In other words, function combined with aesthetics, and yet others see furniture as a form of art. There are perhaps there are perhaps there are perhaps there are perhaps three ways of looking at furniture. There are perhaps three ways of looking at furniture. Some people see it as purely functional and useful and don't bother themselves with aesthetics. Others see it as essential to civilized living and concern themselves with design and how the furniture will look in a room. In other words, function combined with aesthetics, and yet others see furniture as a form of art. Psychologist Saho Takashi, a graduate student at Kyoto University in Japan, joins into one of Japan's many cat cafes. These these establishments allow customers to pay hourly fee for the chance to cuddle some cats. They are popular in Japan because so many apartment buildings forbid pet ownership, but Takashi isn't a typical customer. She is not there for feelings affection, but psychologist Saho Takashi, a graduate student at Kyoto University in Japan, joins into one of Japan's many cat cafes. These establishments allow customers to pay an hourly fee for the chance to cuddle some cats. They are popular in Japan because so many apartment buildings forbid pet ownership, but Takashi isn't a typical customer. She is not there for feeling affection, but to probe their minds. Race took Race took a stab at setting the argument with a meta-analysis, a student of study on whether people can really perceive better than CD quality sound. He analyzes data from 18 studies, including more than 400 participants and nearly 13,000 listening tests. Overall, listeners pick out the better than CD quality track 52.3% of the time, statistically significant if not all that impressive. 52.3. Race took a stab at setting the argument with a meta-analysis, a study of studies, on whether people can really perceive better than CD quality sound. He analyzed data from 18 studies, including more than 400 participants and nearly 13,000 listening sets. Overall, listeners pick out the better than CD quality track 52.3% of the time, statistically significant if not all that impressive. Impressive.
You can get a student card at the reception.
You can get a student card at the receptions.
The country suffered a series of invasions by tribes on present-day Germany and Denmark.
The country suffered a series of invasions by tribes from a present day by Germany and Denmark.
The trial is to increase the interests of the issue in the jurisdiction.
The trial is to listen to the inconcrete and the jurisdictions.
We don't have enough evidence to draw conclusions.
We don't have enough confidence to draw the conclusions. Enough evidence. Don't have enough evidence to draw the conclusion.
The research paper should begin with a thorough review of the literature.
The theory research paper had begun with the theoretical and researchers.
The topic next week on Colonial will be the nuclear disarmament.
The topic next week on Colonial will be on nuclear disarmament.
This can be used as a starting point of my discussion today.
This can be used for the beginning of my discussion today.
Try to explain how your ideas are linked so that there is a logical flow.
Try to explain how the idea is a logical flow.
Acupuncture is a technique involved in traditional Chinese medicine.
Acupuncture is a technique of Chinese old medicines.
Don't forget to do a library tour on the first week of your semester.
Don't forget to do the library tour on the first week of your semester. The image describes the gray parrot race. It also provides information about different categories such as the Timney gray parrots and the Congo gray parrots in million people. As can be seen from the image, the Congo gray parrots contribute the largest, which is over 5,000 hundreds. On the other hand, the Timney gray parrots contribute the smallest, which is over 1,000 millions. In conclusion, it can be said that the image with strong facts and figures has significant impact on the Nigeria, Chad, and Sudan. The image describes the three pencils. It also provides information about different categories such as the pencil, the orange, and the opposite directions. As can be seen from the image, there are also other categories such as the envisage dry goods and design everything and envisage dry goods no true. In conclusion, it can be said that the image with strong facts and figures has significant impact on the three orange pencils. The image describes the global sea ice area. It also provides information about different categories such as the January, February, March, and sea ice area in kilometers. As can be seen from the image, the November contributes the highest, which is over 22 kilometers. On the other hand, the January contributes the smallest, which is 14 kilometers. In conclusion, it can be said that the image with strong facts and figures has significant impact on the 1991 and 1992. The image describes the annual average temperature in southeastern United States. It also provides information about different categories such as the 1900 and 1905 and 1915 in degree of Celsius. As can be seen from the image, the 1990 contributes the highest, which is 65 degree. On the other hand, the 1900 contributes the lowest, which is 61 degree. In conclusion, it can be said that the image with strong facts and figures has significant impact on the 1950 and 1955. The image describes the average rainfall in millimeter graph for Toronto. It also provides information about different categories such as the January and February in precipitation and average rainfall days. As can be seen from the image, the July contributes the most, which is over 40 millimeter. On the other hand, the September contributes the lowest, which is over 20 millimeter. In conclusion, it can be said that the image with strong facts and figures has significant impact on the April and May and June. The image describes the bird collections. It also provides information about different categories such as the parrot and the bird and the wing and the chicken. As can be seen from the image, there are also other categories such as the red and black and the pink and yellow and orange. In conclusion, it can be said that the image with strong facts and figures has significant impact on the bird collection.
The sea turtle life cycle starts when a female lays its eggs on a nesting beach, usually in the tropics. From 6 weeks to 2 months later, a tiny hatchling makes its way to the surface of the sand and heads to the water, dodging every predator imaginable. From the time the hatchlings take their first swim until they return to coastal waters to forage as juveniles may be as long as a decade. This period of time is often referred to as the lost years since following sea turtles' movements during this phase is difficult and their whereabouts are often unknown. Following the lost years, when they have grown to approximately the size of a dinner plate, their pelagic, open ocean phase comes to an end and they return to coastal waters where they forage and continue to mature. During this time, these reptiles are highly mobile, foraging over large areas of ocean.
The topic which is significantly highlighted in the lecture is city life in State Beach. According to the lecture, the speaker denotes that from 6 weeks in 2 months later doing it imaginable. Secondly, he also talked about water is from Japanese and the sea is cloud of movement if difficult unknown. In conclusion, it can be said that they divide for a placement and continuous to measures and for the last area of ocean they is a marble.
Mild cognitive impairment, MCI, is the stage between the expected cognitive decline of normal aging and the more serious decline of dementia. It can involve problems with memory, language, thinking and judgment that are greater than normal age-related changes. If you have mild cognitive impairment, you may be aware that your memory or mental function has slipped. Your family and close friends also may notice a change. But these changes aren't severe enough to significantly interfere with your daily life and usual activities. Mild cognitive impairment may increase your risk of later developing dementia caused by Alzheimer's disease or other neurological conditions. But some people with mild cognitive impairment never get worse, and a few eventually get better.
The topic which is significantly highlighted in the lecture is the MCAS. According to the lecture, the speaker denotes that it can involve problems in language and memory. Firstly, the speaker mentions that you can honor of memory in sleeping. Secondly, he also talked about you can notify in daily life. In conclusion, it can be said that the people may recognize the difference unusually better.
The occasional popping, snapping and crackling sound heard while flexing the knees is known as knee cracking or knee crepitus. It is quite common for the knee joints to produce a cracking sound while performing squats, knee crunches and stretching exercise or while bending or folding the knees. This is accompanied by a grating or popping sensation that is usually not accompanied by any knee pain. The cracking sound, medically known as crepitus, is caused due to the presence of air in the space between the joints, subcutaneous tissue, and bones. Over time, air builds up in the areas surrounding the joint, forming tiny bubbles in the synovial fluid, which acts as a lubricant between the bones and joints. The synovial fluid protects the bones and joints and avoids friction and tearing. These bubbles formed in the synovial fluid burst and ligaments may snap or pop when the knees are bent or flexed.
The topic which is significantly highlighted in the lecture is popping and cracking. According to the lecture, the speaker denotes that it is quite clear that cracking makes people funny. Firstly, the speaker mentions that they accompany makes the popping. Secondly, he also talked about over time the popping which makes the bone are faithful. In conclusion, it can be said that the pupil makes smaller propensity and flash.
It can be one of the more frustrating things about adding a new fish to your tank. You treat your new baby with care, ensure that it has the right temperature and food and everything else, give it a few days to adapt, and still it remains hidden in the back of the tank, behind the rocks, where no one can appreciate your fine new addition. All fish get a little nervous about new surroundings, and most aren't very happy about the shocks and indignities of travel, so it's normal for a new guy to go into hiding for a day or two as it gets used to its new home. However, if it's still being shy after a few days, that tells you there's something else wrong. Until you figure it out and fix it, your friend isn't going to come out.
The topic which is significantly highlighted in the lecture is growth time. According to the lecture, the speaker denotes that giving a few days to adapt behind the rock, there is a new surrounding. Secondly, he also talked about there is not hidden to feel it. In conclusion, it can be said that until you fix it, your friend will gone out.
Johnson has 3 children, 3, 14 and 15 years old. How old is the last child?
13 years.
What do cardiologists specialize in?
The heart.
How do you call the number of people living in a specific area?
The populations.
When a currency loses its value over a period of time, is it an inflation or deflation?
It is depletion.
When a person is fed up, is it a positive mood or negative mood?
Negative mood. Negative mood.
Who is in charge of a football match?
Referee.
When is it okay to drive at a traffic light, green light or red light?
Green light.
Where can you safely observe lions and tigers?
The lion.
Is the sun a star or a planet?
A star.
If someone asks you to go on a date with them, does it mean they like you, or hate you?
Like.
The phrase scientific evidence has become part of the vernacular, thrown about like a hot potato during discussions of major environmental, health or social issues. Climate change is one example. The EU's ban on neonicotinoid pesticides is another. We've heard numerous mentions of the associated evidence, indicating the importance of the issue and the need for action. This evidence is presented by proponents in much the same way that evidence is given in a court case, usually to back up policies or decisions that will impact people's lifestyles. But, unlike in a court case, we are rarely told exactly where the evidence comes from and why it's evidence.
Your success at work will further the success of the organization for which you are employed. But what is the meaning of success and how does a business measure it? Managers must first hire employees with the right skills and qualifications for the job. Once the hiring process is complete, managers seek to ensure that an employee's work is closely aligned with the organization's goals and objectives. To achieve strong employee performance, managers conduct employee performance appraisals, implement training and development programs, and decide when to promote and reassign employees. Let's look at each of these features of managing employee performance.
and spend a bit more time, with things that we find pleasurable and purposeful, which would include spending more time with people that we like being with, would include spending a bit more time outdoors, maybe listening to music. All of these things that I think most of us know, if we stop and think for a moment, would make us feel a bit happier. The interesting question is why we don't do more of it, and helping others too makes us feel nice too. So all these things that we would get good feedback for if we paid attention to those experiences. But one of the reasons why we don't do those things more is we don't pay attention to those experiences as much as we might. We tell ourselves big stories about the things that we think should make us happy. Buying more stuff, earning more money, the kind of narratives and stories that we tell ourselves or we're told by other people that sometimes deviate us off the path of using our time in those ways that make us happier.
Most adults and children in the UK are eating too much sugar. The average British person consumes 15 teaspoons of sugar each day, and often without realising it. The World Health Organization recommends no more than 6 teaspoons of sugar per person per day. Read any food packaging and you will see that sugar can be found in almost all products, ranging from soups to cereals to fish cakes. Sugar occurs naturally in foods such as fruit and milk, and we don't need to cut down on these types of sugars. But we do need to look at the amount of pure sugar within our diet, the amount of sugar we are consuming by eating manufactured foods. For some, cutting down their sugar intake is not
When density is high enough, our natural reaction to the closeness of all those vehicles behind us is to slow down. This reduces the flow and speed, and increases the density, which can cause even more slowness. Eventually the whole thing grinds down to a low speed. Density is increased by people joining a road from on-ramps, and this causes vehicles to slow down, i.e. people are generally bad at merging at speed. Then some people who have been held up in the left-hand lane move to the middle lane, which causes the same problem in the middle lane, traffic backs up. Then some people dive from the middle lane into the overtaking lane, and that slows down. Integrated ticketing allows a person to make a journey that involves transfers within or between different transport modes with a single ticket that is valid for the complete journey, modes being buses, trains, subways and ferries. The purpose of integrated ticketing is to encourage people to use public transport by simplifying switching between transport modes and by increasing the efficiency of the services. In most cases, integrated ticketing is made possible by electronic ticketing technologies such as magnetic stripe cards or smart cards. Some smart card systems are also used for paying for goods and other services such as the Octopus card. 2. Some public transport systems also use paper cash tickets that allow transfers within a specified area, and in some cases, such as the Transperth Family Rider, allow unlimited travel during specified times.
Evidence shows that a simple view of nature can radically improve health outcomes. So why couldn't we design a hospital where every patient had a window with a view? Simple, site-specific designs can make a hospital that heals. Designing it is one thing, getting it built, we learned, is quite another. We worked with Bruce Nizet, a brilliant engineer, and he thought about construction differently than I had been taught in school. When we had to excavate this enormous hilltop, and a bulldozer was expensive and hard to get to site, Bruce suggested doing it by hand, using a method in Rwanda called ubudehe, which means community works for the community. Hundreds of people came with shovels and hoes, and we excavated that hill in half the time and half the cost of that bulldozer. Instead of importing furniture, Bruce started a guild, and he brought in master carpenters to train others on how to make furniture by hand. And on this job site, 15 years after the Rwandan genocide, Bruce insisted that we bring on labor from all backgrounds and that half of them be women. Bruce was using the process of building to heal, not just for those who were sick, but for the entire community as a whole. We call this the locally fabricated way of building, or LoFab. And it has 4 pillars: hire locally, source regionally, train where you can, and most importantly, think about every design decision as an opportunity to invest in the dignity of the places and where you serve.
It's been reported recently that some business schools have decided to make changes to students' grades by increasing them by 10%. This means that a C grade automatically becomes a B, and a B grade automatically becomes an A under the new grading system. And the change is retrospective, which means that it applies to all grades that have been achieved since the school's current grading system, which was introduced in 2007, has been in place. Now, there are at least 8 business schools who've changed their grading levels, and they decided to award their graduates higher grades so they would be more attractive in the highly competitive job market. However, changing grades like this has been criticized by the academic and business communities because many people think the grades have been falsely exaggerated and don't reflect the true ability of the student. In fact, many employers realize when a school has made adjustments to students' grades, and so there is no real benefit in doing this. Lifting the grades may even be damaging to the students because employers may believe that the graduates were given the high grades when they didn't deserve them.
It is not often I get the chance to talk about the psychology of pop music, or rather the lyrics and the effect they have on young people. I must say at the outset that I'm not at all sure about the findings of a recent survey I've been studying, conducted over a period of 30 years. In short, it claims that late adolescents and college students are more narcissistic than ever before. This might well be true, and it might also be true that pop lyrics are becoming more self-absorbed, negative, and violent. But this might reflect the psychology of the writers and performers more than their listeners. Also, as the writers of the study are alarmed to discover, this radical increase in narcissism comes with higher levels of loneliness and depression, which, if you think about it for a second, is hardly surprising. Furthermore, they have detected a link with heightened anger and problems maintaining relationships. Now, a couple of points. First, adolescents are pretty much self-absorbed anyway, but it's rarely pathological. Also, you can read almost anything you want into song lyrics from any era. Again, people nowadays find it easier to express themselves emotionally than their counterparts did 30 years ago. Last, the survey suggests a complete personality change over the period covered. Yet I doubt that personality traits can change so much from one generation to another, or for that matter, from one culture to another.
How would you define reasonable as it is used in law? For example, you are allowed to use reasonable force when defending yourself. It seems to depend on how serious the situation was, whether it was possible to resolve it by peaceful means, whether you were ready to try those means, and, finally, the relative strengths of those involved. Now, most men know, and they've probably grasped this from their earliest years in the school playground, that when it comes to blows, fights don't stop until one of you is in no shape to do any damage to the other. The criteria mentioned seem a bit fuzzy to me. How can you convince a jury you were ready to try and talk your way out of it when the other person would have none of it? And besides, he was quick to land the first punch. Also, you can strike the first blow and still plead self-defense. Of course, you again have the problem of convincing people that the threat was so great that you had no alternative apart from getting beaten up yourself. Reacting calmly and rationally to a perceived threat is not easy to do.
Quality of life is important to all of us. It's something we all try to improve. I'm just wondering how easy it is to improve your quality of life. The biggest things that affect how happy you are your job, house, holidays and friends. Of course there are others. It's quite difficult to change these things. If you don't like your job, it can be difficult to find a better one. My job really affects my quality of life. If it's really stressful, my quality of life goes down. You also need somewhere nice to live. That can be difficult to change. It's important to find a home that feels like home. Holidays can add a lot to your happiness, but we don't have lots of those. And then there are friends. They really improve. Why do we have crime? When will it all stop? It's sad that there is so much crime in our society. It hurts so many people. Most people in the world just want to live happily and be good neighbors. Why do some people turn to crime? Money is a big reason. Many criminals pickpocket, steal, kidnap, or even kill people to get money. There are many terrible crimes in the world. Perhaps the worst is ethnic cleansing. This is a crime against humanity. Many people are killed because of their color or religion. People who commit this crime rarely go to prison. Have you ever been a victim of crime? What do you think we need to do to reduce crime rates? Perhaps you should write.
Competitive stress leads to an emotional turmoil, and the sufferer, at times, may find it hard to control his emotional responses and falls prey to depression. Dr. Pulkit Sharma, consultant clinical psychologist and psychoanalytical therapist, says, prolonged competitive stress can surely lead to depression, especially when the person starts evaluating himself just on the basis of achievement. People who feel that if they achieve and succeed they are worthy, and if they do not they are worthless, are the ones who can slip into depression due to prolonged competitive stress. On the other hand, if the person generally feels good about himself and takes competition in a healthy spirit, then even a prolonged one does not lead to depression.
When up high and enclosed, falling from the high place is impossible. Even so, fear of being up high can develop. In an airliner, we may fear that the plane will fall, or we may feel too disconnected from the earth. We feel fear when our most basic means of controlling feelings, using our own 2 feet to approach what interests us and to back away from what frightens us, is lost. What about fear of high places when not enclosed? In some cases it involves proprioception, the brain's unconscious sense of body in space orientation.
Submitting your group assignment must be issued punctually by one of your group members. While reconciliation is desirable, the basic underlying issues must be addressed. An aerial photograph was promptly registered for federal evaluations. Economic problems cause a rise in unemployment.